The unexpected encounter. In the year 2435, the galaxy was a vast network of civilizations, each with their own unique cultures, technologies, and species. Humanity, ever the curious explorers, had finally found their place in this cosmic puzzle. Earth had become a hub for interstellar diplomacy, and human influence spread across many star systems. Among the most feared species was the Dreeken, a race of enormous predatory creatures known for their aggression and unparalleled strength. Captain Maria Reynolds, a seasoned explorer and diplomat for Earth's Galactic Relations Council, was on a routine mission to the outer rim of the galaxy. Her task was simple: observe and report on the activities of the Dreeken species, who had recently become more isolated and secretive. Many feared that the Dreekens were preparing for war, and it was Maria's job to uncover the truth. As her ship, the Starstrider, hovered above the Dreeken homeworld, Maria received an unexpected message from the surface. It wasn't the warlike declaration she anticipated, but rather a simple request for a meeting. Intrigued and cautious, she decided to accept. What could these deadly creatures possibly want from humanity? Upon landing, Maria was escorted by towering Dreeken warriors to their leader, the infamous General Rakthor, a Dreeken known for leading countless victories in brutal battles. But to her surprise, Rakthor didn't display the hostility she expected. Instead, he greeted her with a respectful bow, his amber eyes glinting in the dim light of the underground cavern. "Captain Reynolds," Rakthor growled, his voice deep and resonant. "We Dreeken do not trust easily, but today I ask for something I never thought I would, a human's help." Stunned by his words, Maria remained silent, waiting for him to continue. "The Dreeken are dying," Rakthor confessed. "A disease has spread through our population, affecting only our young. Our survival depends on an alliance with humans. We need your knowledge, your science." Maria was taken aback. The Dreeken, the most feared species in the galaxy, were seeking help from humans. She quickly realized the gravity of the situation. This wasn't just a plea for aid. It was an opportunity to change the course of galactic history. But the question remained, could humanity trust the Dreeken, a species with such a violent reputation? An unlikely alliance. Back on Earth, the news of the Dreeken request spread like wildfire. The Galactic Council convened in a special session, with representatives from various species, including humans, debating the merits of helping the Dreekens. Some saw it as an opportunity to forge a powerful alliance, while others feared it would backfire, leading to humanity's ruin. Maria, now tasked with leading the diplomatic efforts, stood before the council, her voice calm yet firm. "The Dreekens may be warriors, but they are also a proud species with their own values. If we can help them, we may prevent a future conflict that could devastate the entire galaxy." Her words were met with skepticism. Senator Ilara, a representative from a peaceful species, voiced the concerns of many. What if this is a trap? The Dreekens are known for their deception and brutality. How can we trust them not to turn against us once they've received our help? Maria understood the fear, but she couldn't shake the feeling that this was a pivotal moment for both species. "We take a risk," she admitted, "but it's a risk worth taking. If we succeed, we'll gain more than just an ally. We'll gain peace." After hours of heated debate, the council voted in favor of proceeding with caution. Maria was given the green light to collaborate with Dreeken scientists to find a cure for their young. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but the potential rewards outweighed the dangers. As Maria returned to the Dreeken homeworld, she felt a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. What awaited her on this perilous journey into uncharted territory? Into the heart of the beast. The next few weeks were spent deep within the Dreeken underground laboratories. Maria worked side by side with Dreeken scientists, who, despite their intimidating appearances, were highly intelligent and driven by the same goals as any other species, the survival of their people. One Dreeken in particular, Dr. Carrick, intrigued Maria. Unlike the other Dreekens, who were more reserved around her, Carrick seemed eager to collaborate and even showed a surprising amount of respect for human science. "Your species has a remarkable ability to adapt," Carrick said one day as they worked on a new genetic sequence. It is this adaptability that gives me hope. As they made progress, Maria learned more about Draken culture. Despite their warrior-like nature, they valued honor and loyalty above all else. They fought fiercely not because they were violent by nature, but because they believed in protecting their kin at all costs. The disease that was killing their young had struck at the very heart of their society, threatening their future. Days turned into weeks, and slowly the team began to uncover a potential cure. It wasn't without its challenges. There were many setbacks, and tensions sometimes ran high. But with each obstacle they overcame, Maria and the Drakens grew closer. She began to see them not as the galaxy's deadliest predators, but as fellow beings struggling for survival, just like humans. The crisis deepens. Just as they were on the verge of a breakthrough, disaster struck. A faction within the Draken military, led by a rogue general named Vrosk, opposed the alliance with humans. They believed that relying on an outsider for help was a sign of weakness, and they sought to sabotage the efforts of Maria and her team. One night, an explosion rocked the laboratory, destroying weeks of hard work. Maria barely escaped with her life, and several Draken scientists were injured. Vrosk's faction claimed responsibility, declaring that the Draken race would survive on its own terms or not at all. The situation had escalated beyond diplomacy. Now, Maria faced a critical choice: continue working with the Drakens, knowing that the threat of sabotage loomed over them, or abandon the project and risk losing any chance of saving the Draken people. Determined not to give up, Maria chose to stay. "We're too close to stop now," she told Rakthor, who had personally led the efforts to defend the lab. "If we quit, everything we've worked for will be lost." Rakthor, though enraged by Vrosk's actions, agreed. "The future of my people is at stake. We must finish what we started." With renewed resolve, Maria and her team moved to a secret location where they continued their research under heavy guard. The race against time had begun, and the fate of two species hung in the balance. The turning point. In the new secret facility deep within the rocky caverns of the Draken homeworld, the tension was palpable. The facility, shielded from the watchful eyes of Vrosk's loyalists, became both a sanctuary and a prison for Maria and her team. They were racing against time, knowing that any delay could doom the entire Draken race. Days turned into weeks, and every moment brought new challenges. Maria and the Draken scientists were close to finding a solution to the deadly disease that threatened the Draken people. However, the sabotage had set them back significantly, and now they were forced to work in constant fear of another attack. The team worked around the clock, and despite the setbacks, progress was being made. One evening, as Maria pored over her notes, a sudden beeping caught her attention. A breakthrough. The computer screen displayed data showing the first signs of success. The experimental cure was showing promise in the simulated tests. It wasn't a definitive solution yet, but it was the first hopeful sign in weeks. "Rakthor, you need to see this," Maria called out, her voice tinged with excitement and exhaustion. Rakthor entered the lab, his normally stoic face softening as he saw the data on the screen. "Is this it?" he asked, his deep voice filled with cautious hope. "It's close," Maria replied. "We're getting there, but we need to run more tests to be sure." Rakthor nodded. "You've done more for my people than we ever could have asked. I won't let Vrosk or anyone else stop us now." However, the joy of their potential breakthrough was short-lived. An urgent message flashed on the communication screen. It was from one of Rakthor's most trusted military allies, Commander Xylak. "Rakthor, we've intercepted a message from Vrosk's faction." Xylak's voice crackled through the speakers. "They've located your new facility. They're planning an assault." Rakthor's heart sank. "How much time do we have?" "Not long," Xylak replied grimly. "They'll be here within the hour." Panic swept through the lab. The team had worked too hard and come too far to be stopped now. Maria, Rakthor, and the others exchanged worried glances. There was no time to pack up the equipment or evacuate. "We can't run," Rakthor said, his fists clenching. "We must stand our ground." Maria felt a surge of determination. She had faced dangerous situations before, but this was different. The stakes were higher, and failure wasn't an option. "Then we fight," Maria said, her voice firm. "We'll protect the lab, no matter what." With Zalak's forces on their way, Rakthor and Maria coordinated the defense of the facility. The Drekan soldiers prepared for battle, securing the perimeter and setting up defenses around the laboratory. Maria and her team worked quickly to back up their research, ensuring that even if the worst happened, the data they had gathered wouldn't be lost. As the minutes ticked down, the sound of approaching ships could be heard in the distance. Vrosk's forces had arrived. The first explosion shook the ground, and the battle began. Vrosk's loyalists attacked with ferocity, determined to destroy the facility and end the alliance between humans and Drekans once and for all. But Rakthor's soldiers fought back with equal determination, knowing that the future of their people depended on holding the line. Maria and her team worked furiously inside the lab, transferring critical data to secure locations and making sure the experimental cure was safeguarded. Outside, Rakthor led his forces with unwavering resolve, using every tactic and strategy he had learned over decades of military service. Despite being outnumbered, the defenders held strong, but it was clear that Vrosk's forces wouldn't stop until they had destroyed everything. In the midst of the chaos, Maria realized something. The experimental cure was ready for its first real-world test. It hadn't been fully approved, but time was running out. One of the injured soldiers from Rakthor's unit had been brought inside the lab, suffering from severe wounds. "This could be our chance," Maria said, turning to one of the Drekan scientists. "If it works, we can prove the cure's effectiveness, but we need to act now." The Drekan scientist nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "Do it," he said. "We don't have time to wait." Maria quickly prepared the serum, injecting the injured soldier with the experimental treatment. The room fell silent as they waited. Seconds felt like hours, and everyone held their breath. Slowly, the soldier's condition began to stabilize. His breathing steadied, and the color returned to his scales. The cure was working. "It's a success," Maria whispered, tears of relief welling in her eyes. "We did it." But outside, the battle raged on. Rakthor's forces were holding their ground, but they couldn't last forever. Maria knew they had to end this, and fast. She rushed to the communication console, sending an urgent message to Xylak. "We've stabilized the cure, but we can't hold out much longer. We need reinforcements." Xylak's voice came through almost immediately. "Hold tight, Maria. Reinforcements are on the way." As Maria and her team continued to monitor the soldiers' recovery, they knew that the hardest part was still ahead. The cure was only the first step. Now they had to ensure that Vrosk's forces didn't destroy everything they had worked for. The next few minutes were critical. Would Xylak's reinforcements arrive in time, or would Vrosk's forces overwhelm them? The fate of the Drekan people and the future of the alliance with humanity hung in the balance. The final stand. As the sound of battle echoed through the caverns, Maria glanced at the makeshift medical bay where the Drekan soldier lay. The experimental cure was working, but they needed more time to ensure its success. Outside, Rakthor's forces were barely holding back the assault from Vrosk's loyalists. The lab doors shook with the impact of distant explosions. How long until Xylak's reinforcements arrive? Maria asked Rakthor, who was standing by her side, monitoring the defenses. "Not long," Rakthor replied, gripping his weapon tightly. "But we have to hold out until then." Suddenly, the ground shook violently as another explosion hit closer to the facility. Dust and debris rained down from the cavern ceiling. Maria's heart raced, but she pushed down her fear. There was no time for doubt now. "We need to protect the research at all costs," Maria said firmly. "Even if they breach the facility, they can't destroy the data. It's the key to saving your people." Rakthor's yellow eyes locked with hers. "I'll die before I let that happen." Outside the lab, the situation was becoming more dire. Vrosk's forces were relentless, pushing closer and closer to the facility. The defenders, though brave and determined, were being worn down by the constant barrage. It was clear that Vrosk wouldn't stop until he saw the alliance between the humans and Dreekans crushed. Inside the lab, Maria and the remaining Dreekan scientists frantically worked to secure the data. They transferred the cure's formula to multiple locations, both physical and digital, ensuring that even if the facility fell, the knowledge wouldn't be lost. The doors to the lab shook as Vrosk's forces closed in. The sounds of battle were growing louder. Rakthor and a small group of his most loyal soldiers took up positions to defend the entrance. "They're coming," Rakthor said through gritted teeth. "We won't let them through." Maria stood behind him, her heart pounding in her chest. She wasn't a soldier, but she knew that if Vrosk's men breached the lab, all their work would be lost. She picked up a small blaster, its weight foreign and uncomfortable in her hand, but she was ready to defend what they had fought so hard for. The attack on the door came fast and brutal. The sound of metal being torn apart echoed through the lab as Vrosk's forces broke through. Dreekan soldiers poured into the facility, their eyes burning with determination. Rakthor and his soldiers met them head-on, the air filled with the sound of blasters and the clash of steel. It was a desperate fight, but Rakthor's forces fought with the knowledge that everything was at stake. Maria fired her blaster, staying behind cover as the battle raged around her. She saw Rakthor in the thick of the fight, his movements precise and deadly as he took down Vrosk's soldiers one by one. But there were too many of them. For every soldier Rakthor defeated, two more seemed to take their place. A loud roar echoed through the cavern, and Maria's blood ran cold. Through the smoke and chaos, a figure emerged, Vrosk himself. He was larger than most Dreekans, his scales a deep black that seemed to absorb the light around him. His eyes were filled with fury as he stormed toward the lab, cutting through anyone who stood in his way. "Rakthor!" Maria shouted, her voice barely audible over the noise. Rakthor turned and saw Vrosk approaching. His expression hardened. "Get to safety," he ordered Maria. "I'll deal with him." Before Maria could protest, Rakthor charged at Vrosk. The two Dreekan warriors clashed in a brutal display of strength and skill. Vrosk swung his massive blade, narrowly missing Rakthor, who dodged and countered with lightning speed. Maria watched in horror as the two fought, knowing that if Rakthor fell, all hope would be lost. She wanted to help, but she knew she'd be more of a hindrance in such a battle. Instead, she focused on what she could do, protecting the research. As Rakthor and Vrosk battled, Maria and the remaining scientists continued to back up the data, but time was running out. Vrosk's forces were overwhelming the defenders, and it was only a matter of time before they reached the lab. Suddenly, the communication console beeped to life. It was Silak. "Maria, we're here." Silak's voice crackled through the speakers. "Hold on just a little longer. We're coming in hot." Relief flooded Maria's body. Silak's reinforcements had arrived. Outside, the sound of approaching ships filled the air. Silak's forces descended upon the battlefield with a ferocity that matched Vrosk's. The tide was beginning to turn. Vrosk's soldiers, caught off guard by the sudden arrival of reinforcements, began to retreat. But inside the lab, the fight between Rakthor and Vrosk raged on. The two warriors were locked in a deadly dance, neither willing to back down. Maria could see that Rakthor was growing tired. His movements were slowing, and Vrosk was gaining the upper hand. With a mighty swing, Vrosk knocked Rakthor to the ground. He stood over him, his blade raised for the final strike. "No!" Maria screamed, rushing forward without thinking. But before Vrosk could deliver the killing blow, a blaster shot rang out. Vrosk staggered backward, clutching his side. Silak had arrived just in time, his forces pouring into the facility and driving Vrosk's loyalists back. Rakthor struggled to his feet, bloody but alive. He looked at Maria, who stood frozen, the blaster still in her hand. "You saved my life," he said, his voice hoarse. Maria lowered the blaster, her hands shaking. "We're not done yet." As Silak's forces secured the lab, the battle outside came to a swift end. Vrosk's forces, realizing they were outmatched, retreated into the shadows. For now, the lab was safe, but the cost of victory had been high. Many lives had been lost, and the alliance between humans and Dreekins was still fragile. "We've bought ourselves time," Rakthor said, his voice filled with determination. "But Vrosk will be back, and when he comes, we'll be ready." Maria nodded, her mind already racing with plans for the next phase. The cure had worked, but their fight was far from over. Together, they would continue their mission, no matter the cost. The final push. The relief of victory was short-lived. As Maria and the Dreekin scientists regrouped, they knew the battle was only a temporary reprieve. The cure they had developed showed promise, but it was far from ready for mass distribution. Vrosk had retreated, but his forces were still out there, plotting their next move. The galaxy was watching, waiting to see if this fragile alliance would succeed or crumble under the pressure. Maria stood over a holographic map of the Dreekin homeworld, her brow furrowed in concentration. Rakthor and Sylak stood beside her, along with several key members of the Dreekin leadership. They were deep in discussion about their next steps. "The cure needs to be produced on a massive scale," Maria said, her voice steady but urgent. "We've tested it on a few individuals, but we need to scale up production and get it to the larger population before the disease spreads any further." Sylak nodded in agreement. "We can mobilize our resources, but the facilities we need for that level of production are still under threat. Vrosk won't wait long before attacking again. He knows that if we succeed, his power is gone." Rakthor slammed his fist down on the table. "We can't let him stop us. My people's future depends on this cure. We've come too far to let Vrosk destroy everything." Maria took a deep breath, glancing at the hologram. "We need to secure a production facility, somewhere Vrosk can't reach us easily. We also need to ensure the distribution network is in place, so we can get the cure out quickly." As the group debated possible locations, an idea struck Maria. She looked up at Rakthor and Sylak. "What about the old orbital stations? They're mostly abandoned now, but with some repairs, they could be perfect for large-scale production, and they're harder to attack than ground-based facilities." Rakthor raised an eyebrow. "The orbital stations, they haven't been used in decades." "But that's exactly why they might work," Maria countered. "Vrosk won't be expecting us to move production there. We can secure them, retrofit them for our needs, and start production before he even realizes what we're doing." Sylak nodded thoughtfully. "It's risky, but it could work. We'd have to move quickly, though. Once we start, there's no going back." "Agreed," Maria said. "We'll need a small team to go up first, scout the stations, and assess the repairs needed. After that, we can send in the production teams." Rakthor crossed his arms, his eyes narrowing. "I'll lead the team myself. I won't trust anyone else to oversee this mission." Maria gave him a small smile. "I wouldn't have it any other way." Days later, Maria and Rakthor found themselves aboard a Dreekin shuttle, hurtling toward the largest of the orbital stations. The dark, rusted metal of the station loomed ahead of them as they approached, its exterior pockmarked with the scars of years of disuse. Maria couldn't help but feel a sense of awe at the sheer scale of the structure. It was massive, a relic of a time when the Dreekins had been at the height of their power. "This place is incredible," Maria said, staring out the shuttle window. "It's like a piece of history." Rakthor grunted in response. "It was built during the Dreekin expansion era, when we thought our empire would last forever. Now it's just a reminder of what we've lost." Maria glanced at him. "You're not that different from us, you know. Humanity's history is full of rises and falls, empires built and lost. But we always rebuild, always find a way to survive. That's what you're doing now." Rakthor didn't reply, but Maria could see a flicker of determination in his eyes. He wasn't just fighting for his people's survival anymore, he was fighting for their future. As the shuttle docked with the station, the team quickly got to work assessing the damage. The interior was cold and silent, the air thick with dust. The equipment was old, but still functional. With some modifications, it could be transformed into the production hub they needed. "This will work," Rakthor said, after inspecting the main control room. "It's not perfect, but it'll get the job done." Maria nodded. We'll send in the production teams and start the process immediately. We don't have much time. As the days passed, the station began to come to life again. Scientists, engineers, and workers flooded the facility, repairing machinery, setting up production lines, and preparing for the massive task ahead. The cure was synthesized in larger and larger batches, and soon the first shipments were ready to be sent to the Dreeken homeworld. But Vrosk had not been idle. Despite their efforts to keep the production facility hidden, his spies had discovered their location. The day before the first shipment was set to depart, Maria received a transmission from the Dreeken homeworld. Vrosk's forces are mobilizing. Silak's voice came through the comm. He's planning a full-scale assault on the station. He knows if he doesn't stop us now, it's over for him. Maria's heart sank. They were so close, but Vrosk was preparing to destroy everything they had worked for. We can't let that happen, Maria said, her mind racing. We need to get the cure off the station and down to the planet. If Vrosk attacks before we're ready, all the production equipment could be destroyed. Rakthor clenched his fists. We'll fight him off. We have the defenses in place. Maria shook her head. We can't risk the cure. We need to prioritize getting it to the surface. If we lose the station, we can rebuild. But if we lose the cure... Rakthor sighed, knowing she was right. Then we evacuate the non-combatants and start moving the shipments as fast as possible. The final battle was looming, and it would decide the fate of the Dreeken people. As Maria stood on the observation deck, watching the planet below, she knew that everything depended on what happened next. As the ships prepared to depart, the first wave of Vrosk's forces arrived. Alarms blared throughout the station, and Maria grabbed a comm unit, broadcasting to everyone on board. This is it, everyone. We've come too far to fail now. Get the cure to the surface and hold the line. We're going to win this. Rakthor and his soldiers stood ready as the enemy ships closed in. The final stand had begun. Their mission was clear: survive, protect the cure, and secure a future for both species. The galaxy had underestimated humanity's determination before, but they wouldn't make that mistake again.